Tommy, one of the advantages of going first is you don't have to compete with anybody. And I figured Gene chose me to go first because it couldn't get any worse.
Oh, no.
One of the advantages of being in a church that loves the Lord and honors His Word is that you have His Word in the singing and the praying and the reading and the preaching. And Brother Gary, Hebrews chapter 11, please. Brother Gary mentioned it in his prayer, and that's one of the verses that I have in mind for this morning. When Gene asked me to kick this off, he did not tell me to be few words, but he did say few minutes. So I'm going to speak very quickly. Blah, blah, blah. Hebrews chapter 11, please. In Hebrews chapter 11, we read about Enoch in verse 5. And Enoch had this testimony that he pleased God. Verse 5. Enoch had this testimony that he pleased God. Why are we here? Why am I here? Why are you here? Am I here to please my wife who made me come? Am I here to please my mom and dad who taught me that I should always be in church on Sunday morning? Am I here to please my preacher who's a friend of mine and has been for quite a while? Why am I here? Micah, when you're at work and you say to somebody, my pleasure, is it really? Are you there to please them? You're supposed to be. Enoch had this testimony that he pleased God. Well, that's good. And I hope that's why you're here. I hope you're here to please God. But the next verse tells us that without faith, it is impossible to please Him. Right. Without faith, it's impossible to please Him. For he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. That's the principle, that we can only please God by faith, and that faith requires that we believe that God is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. We are all familiar with young Samuel working for Eli. And if you had asked Samuel when he was, 10, 11, 12, working to serve Eli, why are you here? Well, I'm here because my mom made me here. The only reason Samuel was there working was because his mother had promised God that her son would go. And so he was there. But it was more than that, because he'd been there long enough that he wanted to please Eli. In fact, in the middle of the night when Samuel heard the voice, Samuel, he thought, well, that's Eli, I better run. And so he ran and said, here I am, what do you need? And Eli said, I didn't call you, go back to bed. And then the voice came to Samuel a second time. Samuel. And so Samuel got up out of bed and ran to Eli and said, what do you need? Now, we read from 1 Samuel 3 that Eli's vision was clouded. He didn't see so well. So maybe Samuel understood that, and maybe he knew that Eli might need some help to go to the bathroom or something, or to get a drink of water out of the spigot. And so Samuel ran to him the second time, and Eli said, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. So Samuel went back to bed. And a third time, a voice spoke to him. And Samuel dutifully, without hesitation, got out of bed and ran to Eli and said, here I am, you called me, what do you want? Only on the third occasion did Eli realize that it was God speaking to Samuel. If you read the first verse of 1 Samuel 3, it says that the word of God was precious in those days. There was no open vision. People didn't really have an understanding of God communicating with His people. There was no big mountain that caught on fire or that shook. There was no pillar of cloud to lead them during the day or fire by night. They didn't have God speaking directly. They just went through the motions. They had been taught to have church, and so they were having church. But God didn't openly speak with His people. But on that third occasion, Eli's vision got brighter. And he understood that it was God who had spoken to Samuel. And he said, now you go back to bed, because this is the Lord speaking. And when He calls you, you say, Here I am. I'm listening. So Samuel went back to bed, and sure enough, God spoke to him again. Samuel, Samuel. And what did Samuel say this time? He didn't jump out of bed and get dressed and run to Eli. He did what Eli had told him to do, even though Eli wasn't in the perfect spiritual place at the time. Even though Eli would not have been your number one person to follow. Eli knew that it was God who had spoken to Samuel, and Samuel obeyed and said, "Here I am, Lord. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening." Samuel, who had never heard from God and only knew religion by tradition and by custom, believed that there was a God.
Amen.
And Samuel, second of all, believed that that God would reward him for seeking him.
Amen. Right.
It is impossible to please God if you don't believe that there is a God.
Right.
And it's impossible to please God if you don't believe that he will reward you by answering. May that be our call to worship.
Amen.
Here I am, Lord. Speak.